I never thought I'd be thrown out of my own grandfather's house, dragged into court, branded a threat to my neighbors, and slapped with a restraining order that barred me from even stepping onto the porch where I'd grown up. All of it, every scrap of humiliation and misery, was orchestrated by one person, the president of our so-called HOA. And the cruelest part? That HOA wasn't even real. My name's Marcus Thompson, and when my grandfather Roy passed away, he left me his home on Pinewood Lane. It wasn't some mansion, but it was sturdy, full of memories, and most importantly, outside the jurisdiction of the neighborhood HOA. Roy was stubborn about that. He used to say, "Never give an inch to people who live for control." I didn't fully get it back then, but I do now. When I first moved in, Karen Williams, the president of the HOA, showed up at my door with a plate of cookies and a fat binder under her arm. She smiled, sweet as sugar, said, "Welcome to the neighborhood," then slid the binder toward me like she was handing over a contract with the devil. Inside was a stack of mandatory HOA documents that looked polished, stamped official. She said, "Don't worry, Marcus, everyone joins. You'll just need to sign initial here and agree to the monthly dues." I laughed and told her politely that Roy never signed anything like that, and neither would I. Her smile didn't even twitch, but her eyes did. Cold, sharp. "That's what he said too," she murmured. "But people come around. I'll bring the legal papers by tomorrow." Then she left the cookies on the table like bait and walked off. At first I thought it was just HOA busywork. Nothing serious. Then strange things started happening. Notes tucked into my mailbox, violations I'd never heard of, a blurry photo of my car parked incorrectly, a warning about the paint on my shutters being non-compliant. I checked the county records. My property wasn't under HOA control. But Karen carried herself like judge, jury, and executioner. I tried ignoring her. Big mistake. One morning, cops were pounding on my door. Karen had filed a report claiming I'd threatened her life during a board meeting. I'd never even been to one. Still, I was handcuffed, dragged out in front of my neighbors, humiliated, while Karen stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching like she'd won a prize. By the end of the week, there was a restraining order with my name on it, banning me from stepping foot on the property Roy left me. That's when everything crumbled. My job depended on me working from home, and without access, I lost projects, lost income. Bills piled up. My wife Beth stopped looking me in the eye. She whispered to friends more than she spoke to me. Then one night she told me straight out, "Maybe Karen's right. Maybe you're spiraling." A week later, she filed for divorce. I was crushed, broke, and homeless, all because I wouldn't bow to a fake HOA queen. I spent weeks feeling like a ghost, living out of my truck, staring at stacks of violation letters and court summons. I asked myself 100 times, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have just signed and played along. Was Roy too stubborn, and now I'm paying the price? There were nights I thought about walking away, selling what I could salvage, letting Karen win. But then in the back of Roy's workshop I found an old locked box. Inside, photos, notes, recordings. Roy had been documenting Karen for years. Pictures of her creeping onto porches, rifling through mailboxes. Audio of her threatening neighbors, "Pay the dues, or I'll ruin you." And one document that stopped me cold, the HOA she ran, wasn't even registered with the state. It was a facade, an elaborate con propped up by fear. That was the first time in months I felt alive again. I wasn't crazy. Roy knew. He'd left me the ammunition I needed. I started reaching out quietly to neighbors. Most were too scared to talk. Karen had dirt on all of them. One had tax issues. Another was hiding medical debt. One family feared deportation. Karen had turned their secrets into shackles. But then Mark Johnson, a guy down the street, admitted she'd forced him to repaint his front door 3 times over some shade violation. He'd paid thousands he didn't have. When I showed him Roy's documents, his jaw clenched. He was in. Then came the shocker, Beth. She'd been attending Karen's Little Wives Club meetings. That's where Karen perfected her gaslighting routine, whispering poison, turning neighbors against each other. But Beth saw the cracks. She realized Karen had been twisting her fears about money, about me, into weapons. One night, Beth found me and said, "I'm sorry. She's been playing me too. Tell me what to do." It was risky, but Beth pretended to stay loyal to Karen while secretly feeding me intel. Meeting agendas, financial records, emails. Turns out Karen and her contractor buddy had been inflating repair costs and pocketing the difference. Thousands of dollars siphoned from dues that were never legally owed. We built a case, me, Beth, Mark, and a few others who'd finally had enough. Then we called in an old friend of Roy's lawyer, Robert Davidson, a man Karen couldn't bully. He told us plain, this isn't just harassment, this is fraud. The showdown came on a humid Thursday night. Karen had called a special HOA meeting to publicly denounce me, to strip me of my membership. The clubhouse was packed. Neighbors crammed shoulder to shoulder. Karen strutted in, hair-sprayed stiff pearls flashing binder under her arm like always. She started her speech with that smug voice, "We must protect our community from people who refuse order, who threaten safety like Marcus Thompson." I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice carried. "Funny thing, Karen, you talk about order, but you've never even registered this HOA. You've been running a scam, and I have proof." Beth pressed play on a speaker. Karen's voice filled the room. "If you don't pay, I'll dig up your secrets. I'll ruin you like I ruined Marcus." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Then Mark dropped copies of falsified invoices on the table. Davidson stepped forward, legal documents in hand, declaring the entire HOA illegitimate. Karen's face went from pale to blazing red. She slammed her binder shut and shrieked, "Lies, all lies. This is my neighborhood. I built this place." Her mask cracked, and the sweet smile was gone. She screamed, spit flying, raving about control, about perfection, about how Roy had ruined her dream by refusing to bend. That's when the police walked in. Davidson had tipped them off, and with the evidence we'd compiled, it was enough. Karen fought, clawed, cursed, but they cuffed her right there in front of everyone. The mighty queen of Pinewood dragged out like the fraud she was. The room was silent, every neighbor staring at the empty space she'd left behind. And that's where my story ends, not with a party, not with balloons, just with truth finally ripping through the lies. Because sometimes the only way to beat a bully is to drag their darkness into the light.